Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining what is our very first online webinar at Pomegranate. My name is Tom, for those who don't know. I'm a project manager at Pomegranate, and I'll be chairing today's session. The rest of our team are all on the call as well. You can identify them by their nifty name tags, but they'll also give you a wave. So wave now, team. If you follow our blog, you'll note that every Friday we do a skill share as a team. This is a great means for us to learn from each other and stay on top of what's happening in the online world. Because we're such a diverse group with varying roles and backgrounds, these sessions are always really, really fun and super informative. In our first week back, Nicole, the head of our social media division and our resident Instagram aficionado, did a talk on social media trends for 2021. It was such a fantastic talk that we thought it would be ideal to share with the public, hence today's webinar, which Nicole will be presenting. Nicole, could you wave as well, just so people can see? Nicole, cool. Yeah, so in terms of how today's session is going to work, we know from attending webinars that things tend to run over, so we're keeping it quite structured. So Nicole will have her talk, which will be around 30 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A session where we'll discuss answers from the poll that you all filled in, queries raised in the chat room, which Melissa, if you could please wave Melissa, she will be chairing the chat room. So please feel free to send your queries there and we'll pick those up afterwards. But then it's also really important for us to open the floor for you to ask questions personally if you choose so. So if you need to drop off the call, please feel free to do after the talk. No hard feelings. But yeah, we really hope you enjoyed today's talk. But just before I hand over to Nicole to start her presentation, can I please ask everyone to just turn on their videos for a second and all give Nicole a big wave? Because I think if any of us have ever done a Zoom call, we know that it is quite, it's quite weird to feel quite disconnected from everyone. So if you could all just give Nicole a big wave, that'd be great. Great. I think without further ado, Nicole, I'm going to hand it over to you and I'm going to make you the host and then you can take it from there.
Great, thanks so much, Tom. I'll just share my screen. Great, so welcome everyone to our first ever Pomegranate webinar. I'm Nicole, a social media strategist at Pomegranate, and I'll be your host for today's session on digital trends on how digital trends are evolving in 2021. So with the pandemic in the air, the start to the new year has felt far from a fresh start and often difficult to feel excited about the future. In many ways, diving into this topic of digital innovation sparked quite a few feelings for me, feelings of inspiration, excitement, and motivation. And it also reinforced the wealth of opportunity within this industry and the challenge of keeping up with trends. And that's something that I really love and enjoy. As Tom mentioned, I presented my research to the Pomegranate team at the start of the year, and it was so interesting, really thought it worth sharing with you all. And before I begin, I just want to say that there's really so much information out there, and we've only taken the most useful and interesting trends to share with you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. So obviously we have to first talk about COVID-19 and the behavioral change that has sparked amongst social media users and just in terms of the way that we use and interact with social media and things online. So the biggest behavioral shift really has been that users are searching for value. Lockdowns around the world have sparked behavioral changes by forcing people to be indoors and online. We're spending so much more time on our screens, but exactly how much time we're spending on our screens might surprise you. The typical user is currently spending around 40% of their waking life using connected tech. And the latest data shows that people are spending an average of more than 6.5 hours online each day. That might not be true for every single one of you, but I think it's really important for us to understand how much time people are really spending online and how significantly that has increased due to the fact that we are indoors during lockdown every single day. So with our regular freedom stripped away, connectivity is helping people all over the world to make their lives easier and better. Think about how relieved you were when you ordered your first batch of groceries online and everything arrived perfectly while you remained safely in your own home. That feeling of relief, that feeling of ease, that feeling of connectivity making your life so much better, that is what people are craving and will be craving into 2021. So the real opportunity here for brands is to deliver similar benefits and outcomes via your own digital marketing activities. So in crafting your social media strategy, think about whether or not your content provides value to your target audience. This behavioral shift also means that users are engaging more with content rooted in a lighter mood. So due to the existing oversaturation of heavy-hearted news online. So if you think about your own scrolling behavior, when you are scrolling through Facebook, scrolling through Instagram, whatever social media platform you're scrolling through, there is so much gloom and doom in the news at the moment. When you see something, that's beautiful, that's lighthearted, that's positive news, that's what you're going to engage and interact with. So, thinking that way in how you develop your own content online is really, really valuable. Moving on to social media platforms, I'm going to tell you why it's time to purge your social media platforms. So it's no news that people are using a wider variety of social platforms than ever before. And the number of profiles each person has increased as a result of COVID-19 lockdowns. Many of you may have downloaded more social media platforms through the course of lockdown and last year, or you may have started engaging with social platforms that you kind of had on your phone but never really used, LinkedIn, for example, Pinterest, etc. So what does this mean for brands? In 2021, brands no longer need to be on every single social media platform just for the sake of reaching new or different target audiences. This is because social media has grown to such an extent where most users have all platforms. So we ran an interesting kind of office poll one day, and it was discovered that most of our parents now have Instagram as well. And that just really goes to show how many people are engaging with so many new social media platforms that they never have before. And so what this means is you already have the potential to reach almost all social media users by using just one or two of the larger platforms. So be smarter and more strategic and focus on your organic social media efforts. Focus your organic social media efforts on fewer, bigger, and better platforms rather than being on every single platform. If you do decide that you want to be on every single platform and you have different strategies targeted towards Instagram, different strategy to TikTok, different strategy to Facebook, you have to be wary of audience duplication because we are having so many different social media platforms. It means that if you are, as a brand, post the same post on Facebook, post the same post on Instagram, put the same post on LinkedIn, it's going to lead to what users call repetition pollution. So people are going to feel spammed by your brand if they are getting the same message on every single social media platform that they're visiting within that specific day. So just keep that in mind when you're planning and you're sequencing your content. Try to have different approaches to each platform if you are going to use each platform. Another interesting trend that came as quite a surprise was the resurrection of Pinterest. So Pinterest user base grew quite rapidly in 2020. And what was interesting in my research was to see that some of the top kind of local clothing brands are also using Pinterest, like Superbalist. they're using Pinterest to post outfit ideas, outfit inspiration, and now you can use the platform to kind of shop different outfits and different styles. And it was really interesting to think about Pinterest in that way and to see how it's transformed. And it's largely due to lockdown behavior as well. When you're sitting at home, we're now logging onto Pinterest and collecting kind of DIY home renovation boards, and we're dreaming about trips and doing all of these kinds of nifty things, and vision boards and visuals has become quite important to us. And so it does make sense why Pinterest has grown. So if you are a brand that maybe used Pinterest in the past and no longer saw its value, it is making a big comeback. So it might be worth getting on that platform again. 2020 was also a really massive year for LinkedIn. The platform rolled out LinkedIn Live, events, polls, and stories. And so now if you log onto LinkedIn at the moment, it's looking quite a lot like Facebook. So they've now gone from being, quite a professional business speak type of social media platform to now being one that's largely focused on connectivity and conversations and human connection. Professionals that are working remotely, we're working from home. The reason why we're, engaging with conversational content on LinkedIn is because it's starting to mimic the team environment that we're missing. And that makes a lot of sense. When we're at the office and in office environments, we're talking to our colleagues, we're talking about work, there's, office banter, all of that. And there's that human connection. And now that we're at home during lockdown, that human connection has, we're missing that. And so LinkedIn has filled that gap so nicely. And so people are using it more as a social platform than a professional one. So now conversations on LinkedIn, are more political, more social, more public, economic issues. And there's some really awesome video content that people are using, and hashtags are becoming quite a useful tool on LinkedIn as well. And then just the last really interesting thing to note in terms of social media trends in 2021 is how Instagram's audience has grown. So Instagram's audience size has now grown 39% larger than Facebook, which is really interesting. There are more people now using Instagram than Facebook itself. And so, take that into consideration when deciding which platforms to focus your content strategies on. Moving on to search behavior. So how is Alexa changing the way that we write website copy? If any of you don't know what Alexa is, it's a voice-controlled virtual assistant developed by Amazon. So it's able to play music, provide information. You can find out the weather, it can give you sports scores, news, and all of that. And you do all of that, and it provides you all of that information after giving voice commands. So what most people are actually using Alexa for is to search for things online. So it is replacing the need to type in search terms or search keywords into, Google or into your phone. You just simply ask Alexa. So what this means for, search behavior is that the ways in which the people are searching for things online has evolved. It means that almost half of all the world's internet users are already using voice search and voice commands each month. This means that more natural language is being presented to search platforms as opposed to sharp keywords that people might use, for text searches. So just to give you an example, if you were to search or to ask Alexa something or search via voice command, you would say something like, Alexa, what is the weather like in Paris today? Whereas if you were typing, in your phone or on Google, you would just type Paris weather. And so there you can already see with that direct comparison how the tone and the language has changed in terms of searching for something online. So when we search for things in more of a natural language, what that means is that we need to change the way that we type or we write copy for websites to mimic that natural language. And in that sense, it will boost, your website's SEO online. And you would, if you get on top of it now, you can really get ahead in the SEO game with regards to natural language search. What's also interesting in terms of search behavior is that social networks are now the second top search tool for brand research amongst the world's internet users. Especially in developing economies like ours, people are using social media to search in the same way that they would search, on Google or via voice commands, etc. They're using social media to search for brand content, to search for products, to search for services, all of that within, your Instagram search bar or your Facebook search bar. And what I found was that actually very few brands are optimizing their social media activities for social search. And if you aren't doing that, you really are missing out. So what we recommend is optimizing your existing strategy for your audience's social search behaviors. So how do you achieve this? One of the most important ways to achieve this is through the use of hashtags, which work in a similar way, which works, quite similarly to how keywords work with SEO. So with SEO, you would have a list of keywords that describe your brand and your industry and your service offering. Like if you were advertising jobs or you were JobThread, your keywords would be jobs, jobs Cape Town, job vacancies, etc., etc. How you can now optimize your social media content to include keywords is by using hashtags and generic hashtags that include those specific keywords. So now you would include hashtag jobs or hashtag jobs Cape Town or hashtag career opportunities. So although it's still recommended that you include brand campaign specific hashtags, and so basically with hashtags in the past, what we saw was that your hashtags had to be quite specific to your brand and quite specific to your unique offering. So you would be, for us, we would do kind of hashtag pomegranate, hashtag pomegranate online consulting. But now what we're seeing is because of the search behavioral change, you need to now not only include those specific hashtags, but you also need to include those keyword specific hashtags as well. So your brand specific hashtags are important, but keyword hashtags are really what's going to make your brand become accessible in terms of when people are looking to search for things via social media. So users are also navigating to brand websites via social media. So it's always important to go and look at your social media bios and check, does your description have all of the keywords needed in order to find your brand, but also does it have your specific brand website? Does it have your location? All of that, everything needs to be there and quite visible in order for a user to accurately use social media to search for your company. Your profile needs to be optimized too. So not only your bio, but also you can have specific tags, especially in Facebook, that are allocated to your specific Facebook page. Because now, for example, on Instagram and Facebook, you can actually search for specific tags, and then brands or company pages that are connected to those tags will then pop up. So just basically, in a nutshell, making it really, really easy for brands to find for users to find your company or your brand or your product by using those search tools and search functionality in social media platforms. Cool. Moving to video content. And there's this cool nifty video on this idea of the Jerusalem challenge, which I'm sure you all know and have seen on your respective social media platforms. During lockdown, it was a big trend. So believe it or not, video content is getting even shorter. With the rise of TikTok and Instagram Reels, video content has become more fast-paced. So that means that 15-second video content pieces are outperforming 30-second video content pieces. And that's all to do with our behavioral changes and our attention spans online and on social media. And so what this is called is short form video marketing. And it's really capturing a user's attention within those first 5 seconds so that they even watch, towards the 15-second mark. And if it's even a little bit longer than 15 seconds, it's like sometimes you could really even forget about people completing or finishing watching your video. That is how our attention spans have evolved online. Interestingly enough, adding text to your video can increase the watch time. And this relates directly to the kind of video consumption trends that has been created by Facebook and Instagram stories. So if you just think of your own kind of scrolling habits, when you scroll videos on Facebook, or in the past, when you used to scroll videos on Facebook or in Instagram stories, you scroll without the sound on. It's just much easier to kind of, scroll and tap through your Instagram stories, or scroll Facebook and watch the videos. Only if the video really captures your attention did you kind of click on it and then watch it to completion with the sound on. So adding text to your videos, really does improve the watch time, because people can then read and interact with it without sound. And so that will make people kind of watch your video till the end. But as I was kind of talking about, and just when we were, starting to experience this trend of people of scrolling without sound, lockdown happened and it completely changed behaviors. So lockdown happened, TikTok became, super, super trendy, and so did Instagram Reels. And what happened is we were at home, meaning that we can watch videos with sound on. We're not at work, we're not on the bus, we're not, in public spaces. And so there's another behavioral shift that happened where we're watching videos with sound on. And so that's also really, really interesting to note, is that behaviors are changing in that way. And so now videos with sound are consumed much better on TikTok and Instagram and on Facebook. It's no longer something that you really have to stress about. And then just a last tidbit on videos is that if you do have a really, really beautiful, longer length video that you've shot for your brand or your company that you do want to share on social media, do share it on Facebook. It's going to perform much better than sharing it on Instagram or TikTok or Twitter, just because that is where, the fast-paced shorter video content is being prioritized by the platforms themselves. Cool. Now we'll move on to Facebook ads. So what I really, really liked about this specific graphic is that it shows it's a really, really good representation of the global ad spend in social media for 2020. So you can see that most of the global ad spend went towards Facebook feed. Instagram feed was also really, really big. And then Instagram stories and Facebook Instagram video and Instagram Explore. And what's really, really interesting to note is that Facebook feed, is the largest, but the second largest being Instagram and Instagram stories and the classic audience network. Those are all placements that exist when you actually set up a Facebook ad. So when you do set up a Facebook ad, that ad is then automatically shared on Instagram and audience network and Instagram stories, etc., etc. So it makes sense why those are the second and third and fourth largest in terms of ad spend. But what I'm really trying to show you is how oversaturated and competitive Facebook ads have become, because everybody is using it for their brand. So with so many brands using Facebook ads, the online marketplace has become way more saturated, way more competitive, and it means that the cost of advertising on Facebook continues to rise. So just in my personal experience, the average cost per click on Facebook in 2019 for me was around R1. And I could confidently say, we're going to run this ad, it's going to cost R1 per click. And if you spend R1,000, we're going to get 1,000 clicks on your ad. But now, it's changed. It's become so much more competitive and so varied. A cost per click can go as high as 3 Rand and even 15 Rand for lead ads. Just in my personal experience. So what this means is for brands is that you need to return to the foundational aspects of running ad campaigns on Facebook and Instagram in order to be successful. So think about what a cost per click means for you and what return on investment means for you. So when you're setting up your ads, think about, okay, if I spend 2 Rand on a click, or if it costs me 2 Rand for somebody to click and they go on my website and they actually purchase a product, is that then worth it for me? And most of the time it is. And then you think back, okay, well, 2 Rand per click, is not actually as high as I thought it was. So if you start to think of it strategically like that, you'll then know how much you'd want to spend per click with your Facebook ads. What we've also seen is specifically with regards to Facebook ads is that video ads are converting way better than static ads, which is just a specific image. And this is largely due to Facebook, the platform, actually prioritizing video and quality content because they want to keep up with the trends. They also want to be, the front runner in terms of social media and what's going on. And so all ads that have like really good, crisp 15-second quality video content, they're being prioritized in terms of audience feeds, and they're converting much better because video content's way more exciting and much more captivating than static. Then what was also really, really surprising in terms of my research on 2021 trends was that the fact that Facebook removed their 20% text rule on the platform. And so what the 20% text rule was that in order for your ad to run successfully or at optimal performance, you cannot have an image with more than 20% text overlaid on that image. So, that limited us quite a lot. And when we heard that, this rule has now been removed, there was quite a kind of uproar, in the office, because we've spent years trying to wrangle clients into accepting the fact that they can't have, a lot of text on their images. Sometimes, the graphic can be beautiful and it's filled with, beautiful punchy text, but we've tried to make the case over and over again, saying that your ad will not perform well if it has this much text. And now Facebook has removed that rule, and it's now the fact that your ad can perform well with a lot of text if it's really, really good quality. And so now we kind of have to start to acknowledge that, and it's been a challenge for us to actually incorporate that into our strategies as well and think strategically about how we can now develop graphics that will perform really, really well with nice punchy text. So there you pretty much have it. That was the 2021 digital trends that we found the most interesting as a team. With all the gloom in the world right now, I hope that this short presentation sparks some excitement for your digital marketing efforts this year and left you feeling a little bit less uncertain, at least about one aspect in terms of what's to come this year. So thank you all for joining.
Well, let me say, I think on behalf of all of us, thank you so much, Nicole. That was a super informative presentation. As we already mentioned, and as Nicole's highlighted, we are going to have a Q&A session. I'm going to start us off though with a question that actually stems from the poll that all of you filled in through the registration form. But please, in the meantime, please feel free to either indicate whether you'd like to ask a question or send a question for me to ask Nicole in the chat room, which I see a few of you have already sent through questions, so that's great. And then we'll try and get through as many as possible. But yeah, to get us started, I think from the poll, what was super, super interesting, if I can jog all your memories, we asked two questions. The first question was, do you have a hunch about how the pandemic has shaped social media? If we have time, I think we'll pull up some of those. But the one that we really found interesting was, our second question was, which of these platforms do you reckon will be 2021's darling? Just to joggle your memories, the options were Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. What we found really, really interesting is that the top two performing platforms were TikTok, with 36% of you saying TikTok you thought would be the best platform in 2021, and Instagram with 30%. Facebook, 17%. That's kind of to be expected. YouTube, 11%. Twitter, 4%. But really, quite astounding, especially considering what Nicole's chatted about today. LinkedIn, only 2% of you thought would kind of have its renaissance in 2021. And none of you said Pinterest. So already there, it's kind of interesting just looking at Nicole's presentation. Nicole, from your end, what do you make of that kind of, what do you make of those results? I know we've kind of shared the percentages beforehand. You unmute yourself.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I mean, the results were pretty much to be expected and pretty accurate in terms of, the top three being Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. TikTok has, boomed and risen so quickly with the fact that people have been in lockdown and have nothing better than to create cool 30-second dance videos and post them online. But actually, the answer to the poll, surprisingly, is YouTube. YouTube is now the largest platform, and that is not just because also COVID-19 behaviors. What are we doing when we're home? We're watching videos, we're watching content on YouTube. And for people that don't have, platforms like Netflix or other streaming services, YouTube has been the kind of place to go in terms of watching content to keep yourself entertained at home during lockdown.
Amazing. We've already got one question in the group, which I think is a really, really good one. It comes from Julian. She wanted to know, how can she use LinkedIn to her advantage in terms of reaching potential brands or reaching out to brands and a potential audience? I've also asked to clarify whether it's in her own capacity or as a brand. And I think Julian makes a really good point, and I think it's like this for a lot of people, is that she's on there in a personal capacity, but it's very much that she's personifying her brand. I think a lot of people have that experience. So what kind of tip would you give for reaching out to brands and your kind of potential audience on LinkedIn?
So what has been making a lot of LinkedIn posts go quite viral or receive quite a lot of engagement at the moment is when people are using the trending hashtags on LinkedIn. So similar to how you'd see kind of trending hashtags or breaking news hashtags on Twitter, within each specific industry, that's been happening now on LinkedIn. So you can actually go and you can see or look up the trending topics, for your industry, for your brand, or the trending hashtags, and make sure to include, 4 or 5 of those in your actual content. So there are actual people that are following those specific hashtag trends. So when they click on that hashtag, a thread comes up of all the posts, relevant to that hashtag, and then your post will come up there as well. So that will give you a lot of reach within that specific hashtag category within your industry. Another cool thing you can do or good thing to do is if you want to kind of get attention from specific brands or specific companies is to establish or write some engagement posts, tagging specific companies. You can tag quite a few companies in or brands or people in your posts when you do images or in your content itself. And then also to just build your kind of connection network, because when you do connect with someone and a notification comes and pops up within their inbox and they get a notification that you've now reached out to them, and then you become top of mind within that specific person's mind just for that few seconds, and then they either connect with you or not. And so that's a really good way to get someone's attention that you really want to.
Amazing. Thanks, Nicole. A good question she posed from one of our own. Sarah asked, if you do include text in your video as well as sound, how would you say you should use it to add to your storytelling creatively? So rather than just a caption device. And if you do, this is a bit on the spot, but do you have an example of a kind of brand that does well in terms of incorporating text in their videos with audio?
Mm-hmm. So the way that I've seen it that works quite successfully is almost as a kind of video caption base, but you wouldn't traditionally put it at the bottom of your screen. Because when you are scrolling video content, it's going to be mostly on your phone. And it's also, a lot of video content these days are going to be filmed, within this kind of, how can I say, size. It's not going to be that kind of cut off across your phone. And so if you did have your captions at the bottom of your screen as normal, they would kind of fall away. They wouldn't, grab anyone's attention. So what cool ways people are doing it is kind of frame by frame, adding in the captions, right next to them where they're speaking, and then it pops up here and then it pops up there, and that keeps things quite interesting and visual. And then also in terms of what brands are doing brands are doing really well. I think BuzzFeed's channel would be one to check out, Sarah, on TikTok specifically. Instagram Reels is quite new in terms of that kind of 15-second video, so I'm not too familiar with, like, a lot of brands are not doing really well on there as yet. They're reposting things from TikTok on there because they haven't really got the hang of Instagram Reels yet. But BuzzFeed's really good on TikTok.
Amazing. There's some really good questions in the chat room. I think this one is, I think many people relate to. How many hashtags should you use on Instagram? And I think coming out of your talk, on other platforms as well. So I mean, it's always been that thing of include as many as you can, and now I think they've kind of pulled back on that. And now you're saying hashtags on LinkedIn are a big deal. So yeah, maybe just your kind of quick summary, what you think is probably the best for each platform.
Mm-hmm. It's a little bit different on each platform. Facebook, you'll maybe use 2-3 hashtags that are quite specific to your brand. But now with kind of search, if you think of what I spoke about in terms of search behavior, especially on Instagram and LinkedIn, really try to use a few more hashtags than just 2 or 3. So you would incorporate your kind of brand specific hashtags, such as hashtag pomegranate, but then you would also include your kind of generic keyword ones like hashtag digital marketing, hashtag social media, and I would go back to what we used to try to incorporate in our hashtag strategies for Instagram, which was 10 to 15 hashtags, which is quite a lot. But because of the kind of search behavior that's we've been seeing, I do recommend that on Instagram specifically. And then on LinkedIn, that might come across as a bit spammy, so I'd go from 5 to 7 hashtags on LinkedIn.
Amazing. I think another one's kind of follow up to us from the same question is, because you've been talking about shorter videos are kind of king, they're becoming more and more important. Is there still room for the longer video? I mean, you've already mentioned YouTube is by far the biggest, and I think in specific, one that's obviously made a big splash, and now we're wondering, is it relevant, is Instagram TV. Is that actually still a thing? Are people going to still be using it, or what's the kind of focus?
Yeah, so if you do there is still room for longer length video content, especially if it's quality content, that people are going to enjoy watching. But the place for that specifically is Facebook. And then you can try Instagram TV. What I've seen is that Reels have really started to overtake Instagram TV. And what that means is people's attention spans on Instagram are, not as are not what they were. I don't know if one thing I was going to mention in my presentation was that just if you think of your own kind of habits on Instagram, how you much prefer, or rather prefer, to scroll the explore feed where you see multiple tiles of different things. And because you're so used to that and you're enjoying that so much, when you go back to your normal or regular news feed, looking at one post at a time starts to feel boring and like not exciting enough. And so it's really about getting it right. So in terms and getting it platform specific. So in terms of longer videos, Facebook, it will do really well. YouTube as well, if you get a good kind of subscription base there on YouTube. And then I think they would do well on Instagram TV if you strategically shot the video to have a really, punchy first 5 seconds. So people are hooked and they're going to watch your full video.
Thanks, Nicole. I've got a question, and the person has very politely said they would ask the question themselves. So Liz, can I hand it over to you? I think you got a great question, especially for us Cape Town folk. You are allowed to unmute yourself. I've given folks. No, can't do. Give me 2 seconds.
Oh no, I'm allowed. Thank you. Thanks, Tom. I know there are 2 travel brands represented here today. Shout out to Mark at Satori Africa and to Matt at Bike and Hike. So yeah, I was wondering, Nicole, if you have any advice for what these brands can do on social media while they're waiting for tourists to return.
Mm-hmm. So social media at the moment, what I've seen, and I've also have been, just dreaming about travel way more than I usually do, just because of the fact that it's been restricted and it just can't happen. And so, what users are using social media for largely is for that sense of escape, that sense of dreaming, of doing something, of taking a chance, of actually being able to travel. And so a lot of what I've seen is performing really well in terms of travel agencies and especially travel bloggers themselves, is that beautiful video content that of their own travel experiences, of what's to come, of like the resorts and the beautiful places that they've stayed at, etc., etc. Getting people to think about it and dream about it and add it to their bucket lists, because then they'll eventually be able to book again, and that's what they'll think about.
Thanks, Nicole.
Cool, thank you.
Very good question here from Techafatso on the chat room. She would like to know whether the visual design aspects of an Instagram page are as important as the SEO. What she's referring to specifically is how visually pleasing one's brand page is at a quick glance. And this is including and not limited to like grid layouts that can be utilized to make different posts kind of stand out. Is that something, we've all had, I'm sure we've all experienced that thing where someone posts a post of just white and you're like, what is that? You go on their profile and there's all these things. So yeah, like talking about profile visits and things like that, is that something that's still a trend? Are people still looking at people's pages?
Mm-hmm. Definitely, I would say yes. So because so many people on Instagram, so many brands on Instagram, it is important to still stand out visually. People need to see value, and it goes back to that question of like creating value with your social media content. So people want to know that the platform I'm following is going to be valuable for me. So what value are they getting out of following your page? So the fact that the content is beautiful, the content is high quality, you're not having blurry images, you're posting regularly. So I would say that first and foremost, the decision to follow a brand, the decision that a user makes to follow a brand will fall on the look and feel of the page, the bio, the logo, the grid layout, etc., etc. But SEO is still important in order for someone to first and foremost find your brand page on Instagram. So they're 2 very different things, but I would say that in terms of follower growth specifically, the look and feel is the most important. And then just making yourself visible on the platform, that's where SEO comes in.
So I think this is a very good question, and it's related specific to ads. As small content creators, would you suggest that one makes use of promoting videos and video ads on both Instagram and Facebook? I have a feeling I know what you're going to say about this because the 2 are linked. Jill, hand it over to you.
Sorry, just to clarify, it was Instagram and Facebook, right?
Yeah. If you should do ads on both.
So I wouldn't recommend it. When you are launching your ads on Facebook themselves, they are automatically placed on Instagram. And so that's where I would start, and that's where you're going to get the most results, is where you are kind of having your ad launched from one specific platform. You've crafted your specific audience, your target audience on that platform. You've taken the time to do everything that you need to with that specific ad, and then all you do is you add Instagram to your placements And so your ad will show to your Instagram or to audiences on Instagram as well. It would just take extra time and effort to do it on both platforms. That's not necessarily needed. And then you might get that repetition pollution that we spoke about.
And then another really good question is someone's followers. If your followers keep dropping on the daily on Instagram, so you just keep your follower count keep kind of dropping down, and one's losing more followers than you gain, and then your engagement is also on the wane. What do you suggest that someone does to prevent this kind of drop in both followers and engagements, and grow your following organically, specifically, as well as grow your engagement?
Cool. So there is, it's platform specific, but there is like a formula that you can start to apply to your content to start to see a consistent growth in following and consistent engagement. It starts at the base of your kind of social media strategy, in terms of what we do for our clients every day, but we are kind of brainstorming the specific formula, the specific strategy for each platform in order to make sure that there's a consistent growth in following, but also engagement. So that could be things like post frequency, making sure that you're posting every day, but you're not posting repetitive content. Your content's not the same. You have quite diversified content as well. Your content's valuable to your audience. You have really good, strong visuals. Also, your content is written well. You can take a really nice storytelling approach. You have hashtags, etc., etc. And then also, if you've seen quite a stagnation in terms of following, but you are doing things like frequently posting, you've upped the quality of your content, etc., etc., then having some sort of Facebook promotion, with even if it's 500 Rand, for the month, is really going to do well to offset that stagnation and get your content to your specific target audience, but just people that haven't seen your content before. And that will just give things a kind of kickstart again. And then you can start, with your content strategy, et cetera, et cetera. And then also in terms of attracting engagement, it's really important to do engagement-focused content and engagement-focused posts. So, you could say like, oh, I posted this, but no one commented or no one shared. It's like, then you need to ask yourself, would you yourself share it? Is it interesting content? And is it engagement focused? So is it a poll asking people to, give their answers or provide their opinions? Is it question focused? So do people feel like they want to provide their opinion via a comment, et cetera, et cetera. So there's quite a few things that you can add to your formula for each platform to ensure that they're growing.
Excellent. Cool. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat room if you want me to phrase it to Nicole, or if you want to ask it yourself. But there is actually a few that I wanted to pull through from the poll, which I would kind of reframe as a question to you, Nicole. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the first question that was in our registration form is, do you have a hunch about how the pandemic has shaped social media? Britt noted that she's seen that people have really have an increased feel a need for social media to feel connected. And I think we're kind of seeing that in content. What can you kind of suggest for content creators that are in this kind of landscape now? How do they get more connected with their audience in these kind of times? And I think we've kind of chatted about it with the travel brands, but maybe a bit more generally, what kind of ideas would you suggest?
I think one of the most important things is to be more human and to have a very human tone, and taking a storytelling approach, but really connecting to your audience, to your users online by being realistic, by being, understanding of the current times and what's going on in the world, not seeming tone deaf where, you're celebrating something big while the world's going through something, so difficult. So being really, how can I say, being really human, and also being taking into account what's kind of going on in the world, would be really important at the moment. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything.
I think you hit the nail on the head, Nicole. Being cognitive of what's going on around you. I think Melissa, one of our colleagues, wrote a really great piece talking about Blackout Tuesday, which happened obviously last year, and not being tone deaf to what's happening in the world. I think that's really important. And I think the more the brands do that, the better. And it's not a case of not trying to be caught out. It's just, you want to be seen to actually be being involved. And I think, speaking to what Gillian said, a lot of the time, especially for smaller brands, you are your brand. So people have that kind of very close and personal connection. I think a really good question from Mark in the chat room was,
sorry.
Yes.
Tom, Sarah had one thing to add on that question.
Thanks. Basically, I was going to refer to Molesa's blog, and there was a really interesting moment earlier last year for us when Blackout Tuesday was happening, and it actually made us ask the question, should anyone be saying anything right now? And sometimes the best decision is not to say anything and to stop your posts. Because of the nature of social media, if something's happening in America, it's sort of happening to us too. So I think you have to be more cognizant than ever of what's happening in the world, and as Nicole said, not being tone deaf. It's probably not the right space for it now, but Melissa gave a really interesting skill share on social media algorithms and how they are actually pushing this connectedness that Nicole was talking about, which is super interesting from like a technical algorithmic perspective, not just a language perspective, which is where I feel comfortable. So I think that's definitely something we should look into for a future webinar perhaps, because it's so different on each platform, and there's just so many things to consider in terms of how to connect with people, whether it's the language you speak, when you post, what you say, what time of day you post, and also how that ties into the algorithms of each platform and how they are prioritizing certain content.
Mm-hmm.
Great point. And I think a good one, another really good question, I think maybe one of the last ones, is any insights or data on podcast consumption? You might not think of podcasts as social media, but in your experience and just kind of looking online, is it the same trend as we've seen with YouTube in terms of everyone being at home, tuning in a lot more? I know it's definitely the case for me, but what have you noted, Nicole?
It's definitely, podcast consumption is definitely not as big as YouTube, I would say. But I did read something recently that said that Spotify's podcast consumption has doubled in 2020. So, it's doubled, and because, trends are leaking over into 2021, it's really going to start increasing even more.
Awesome. Well, I think on that note, I just want to say a really big thank you to all of you for attending today's session and for a lot of you sending through questions. I think this has been a very exciting and very first webinar for us at Pomegranate. But I know we all need to return to our day jobs now, or our podcasts, whatever the case may be. We'll definitely do another talk again soon. We'll do a follow-up mail with a recording of today's session, as well as a blog post version of today's session, if you want to share that. As well as a poll for our next webinar topic. I think a few have already just popped up in our discussions today. But of course, I'm going to save the last big, massive thank you to Nicole. And if again, I can ask everyone to just give Nicole a big wave. I think that'd be a great way to kind of sign off. But thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thanks everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon further.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.